On my 30th birthday, I got a house from the man who gave me nothing else. 3 days later, my mother showed up at the front gate with her new family and a smile that meant war. I didn't even know she knew the address. I wasn't expecting anything that morning, just folding laundry in the kitchen while the kettle screamed and the dog barked at nothing again, when a white envelope slid through the mail slot, thick and crusted with a gold emblem I didn't recognize. And for a second I thought it was another wedding invitation from people I barely knew, but it wasn't. It was from a law firm in Marin County, and the moment I touched it, I knew. It was him, my father, the one who disappeared into yachts and legacy and a second wife, before I was old enough to ask questions about abandonment. Colin got home just as I was sitting on the floor staring at the letter, still unopened, and I didn't even have to explain because he saw my face and said, "Is it your dad?" And I nodded and handed it to him because my hands were shaking like I'd done something wrong. He opened it carefully, slower than I would have, his fingers tracing the paper like it was a relic, and then he looked up, said, "You're not going to believe this." And I knew before he said the words, I just knew, but still I wasn't ready for him to whisper, "He gave you a house." We drove there that same day, didn't even pack a bag, just grabbed snacks and chargers and left the apartment behind like it never belonged to us anyway. The directions led us through winding coastal roads I'd only seen in perfume commercials, cliffs dropping into sea foam, a sky that kept changing its mind, and then there it was, hidden behind a rusted black gate and rows of sunburned rosemary, a house made of stone and copper, like it had been built to survive people who couldn't. I didn't speak when we walked in, didn't breathe until I touched the staircase railing, and even then it didn't feel real. Colin walked through every room like a little boy in a castle, running his hand along the windows, flicking switches, opening drawers like the previous life had been frozen in place. There were photographs on the hallway shelf I didn't recognize, books that smelled like cigarettes and salt air, a record player still spinning dust, and it all felt like a memory I didn't live but somehow missed anyway. When we reached the attic, he turned to me and said, "This is ours, Ray, it's really yours." And I wanted to believe him, but something in my stomach said, not yet. We didn't tell anyone, not at first, not even his family, especially not mine. I wasn't ready to hear my mother's voice twist this into something it wasn't, but of course, silence doesn't stop storms. 3 days later, the front gate buzzed around noon. And when I checked the camera, there she was, Trina, my mother, standing in designer wedges on the gravel like it was her driveway. Behind her, her new husband in khaki shorts and mirrored sunglasses, and those kids, the twins, 16 maybe, already filming the house with their phones like it was something for TikTok, not the last thing I had left from my father. Colin tried to be polite, offered coffee, opened the door like he didn't know the damage this woman carried in her hands. She walked straight in without asking, glanced around and said, "Wow, he really went all out," and I just nodded. Holding the mug so tight I thought it would crack, she turned to me and smiled, that soft, sugary smile that used to mean we're out of rent money, and said, "Your father owed me more than back child support, don't you think?" And I realized then that she hadn't come to see me, she came to claim something. I didn't answer her question, not right away, just told her it wasn't a good time, that we were still unpacking, and she laughed like that was cute, walked over to the living room window and said, "This view shouldn't go to waste," her husband added. Big place for just two people, and I watched it happen. The way they started using the language of us, the way her kids started asking where the bedrooms were, like we'd invited them, like it was their vacation home too. Colin squeezed my hand under the table and said, gently, "They'll be gone by tomorrow," but deep down I knew that wasn't true. That night, I heard her on the phone in the hallway, didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the door was cracked and her voice carried like it always did when she was lying to someone. "She's soft," she said. "She'll give it up if we're patient. She's always been the guilt type." And then she added something that made my skin go cold. "If she doesn't, we'll get Colin to see reason. Husbands are easier when they're angry." I stepped back before I heard the rest, heart hammering, because I knew what was coming next, and this time, I wasn't sure I could stop it. The guest sheets were still damp from the dryer when Trina told Colin they'd be staying another week. She didn't ask, just said it while slicing peaches into a bowl we hadn't even unpacked yet. The plumbing at our rental's a disaster, she said, and besides, it's easier this way. Colin looked at me across the kitchen island, waiting for a signal I didn't send. I didn't want a scene, not in front of her, so I just nodded like we were all on the same page, even though everything in my body said we weren't even reading the same book. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the fan spinning slow above us while Colin scrolled beside me. I could feel him wanting to ask, maybe even expecting me to explain, but he didn't, and I was too tired to volunteer it. Too aware of how strange this all was, how quiet he'd become around them, especially her, how easily she wrapped herself into our routines. "I'll make dinner tomorrow," she said earlier, like she was offering a favor, but it didn't feel like generosity. It felt like reclaiming something, like she was dusting off an old throne. By Thursday, she'd rearranged the living room, said the feng shui was terrible, moved the armchairs into the sunroom without asking, switched our framed photos with her own. Even hung a canvas her youngest painted over the fireplace like it was a museum installation. Colin made a joke about it at dinner, something light, but Trina didn't laugh. She just said, "This house needs a woman's touch," and I caught the implication too late. Didn't say anything, just stared at the lasagna on my plate. While her husband talked about converting the garage, "Could be a studio," he said, "plenty of space." Colin and I fought that night, quietly, behind a closed door, the kind of fight where everything sounds like a question but isn't. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked. "You just let her take over," and I said, "She's my mother. What do you want me to do? Throw her out?" And he said, "It's your house, Ray, or did you forget that too?" I didn't have an answer, just stared at my reflection in the mirror across the room, wondered if maybe he had a point, if maybe I'd been taught to make room for people who never made room for me. The next morning, my mother offered to do the grocery run, said I looked tired, said we deserved a break, took Colin's credit card without waiting for a response, and kissed him on the cheek before walking out the door. I watched him flinch slightly, like even he didn't see it coming, and when I looked at him, he said, "She's being helpful," and I nodded, even though she came back with champagne, 5 bags of imported snacks, a silk robe for herself, and not a single thing from the actual list. "We left her. They didn't have oat milk," she said, unapologetically. That night, I found Colin outside, sitting on the porch steps, wine glass in hand, staring at the stars like he could rearrange them if he stared long enough. "You okay?" I asked, and he shrugged, said, "Your mom's intense," and I waited for more, but he didn't offer it, just added, "She talks to me like we're friends," and I said, "Is that a problem?" And he hesitated, said, "Not really," but it didn't feel true, so I pressed a little, asked, "What did she say?" And he glanced at me sideways, said, "Nothing bad, just things about you I didn't know." The next morning, her voice came through the floorboards before I was even fully awake. She was on the phone again, walking the halls barefoot, whispering but not enough. "He's starting to see it," she said. "Give it a week, maybe 2, she'll push him too far. And then he'll come to us." My hands went cold before my feet hit the floor. I waited until the call ended, stepped into the hallway, didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watched her brush her hair like she hadn't said a word. And then finally asked, "Are you trying to turn my husband against me?" She blinked once, twice, didn't answer, just smiled like I'd asked something childish. "Honey, I'm trying to help," she said. "You and Colin are fragile. You can't see it because you're in it, but I can." And then she added, "If I wanted the house, I'd already have it. Believe me." And something about the way she said that, so calm, so sure, made my heart thud hard against my ribs. I stepped back without meaning to, felt the wall behind me, and when she brushed past me, her perfume trailing behind like smoke, I realized I'd just lost whatever upper hand I thought I had. I didn't tell him what she said, didn't want to start a war without proof. Instead, I just watched, let things settle into this new, quiet unease. Colin still made me coffee in the morning, still kissed my cheek before calls, but the space between us was heavier now. Like every room had one more chair than it needed. She started calling him for things I should have been asked. Tax questions, garden repairs. Even when she got locked out of the guest bathroom, she didn't knock on my door. She waited for him to get home, said, "I trust Colin with keys." One afternoon, I came home early and found them in the garage. He was under the sink looking for the breaker box. She was sitting on the dryer, ankles crossed, wine glass in hand, laughing at something I didn't hear. When I walked in, she said, "Oh, Ray, don't be mad. We were just figuring out the electric." Like she lived here, like the house didn't exist before she stepped into it. Colin stood quickly, wiped his hands on a rag, said, "It's a mess down here," but wouldn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push, just nodded and backed out. That night, he was quiet again, not cold, just tired in a way that felt unfamiliar. I waited until we were in bed and asked if everything was okay. He didn't answer right away, then said, "Your mom's been through a lot, Ray," and I blinked. Unsure where that came from, asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" And he said, "I just think it's complicated for her, seeing you inherit all this." After the way things ended with your dad, I sat up, stared at him, said, "You think I should give it to her?" And he said, "I didn't say that," but he didn't deny it either. 2 days later, I found a manila envelope in the kitchen drawer, addressed to Colin Vale, no stamp, no return label, just tucked between batteries and expired coupons like it belonged there. Inside were photos of me, younger, messier. Years I've spent trying to forget, nights I don't remember clearly, faces I don't want to name. There were records too, hospital notes, rehab forms I never signed, one sheet printed with red pen. Divorce equals full asset review. I sat on the floor holding them, heart thudding. When he came in and saw me, he stopped in the doorway, said quietly, "I wasn't going to do it." I didn't answer, just stared, waiting for the part where he explained why he kept it. He sat across from me, didn't try to take the envelope back, just said, "She promised it would stay quiet if I played along, said you wouldn't survive a scandal like this." I asked, "Did you believe her?" And he said, "At first I didn't, but then she showed me the emails from your father's lawyer, said the deed might be contestable if we divorced, and I didn't know what to do. Ray, I just froze." I laughed, short and bitter, said, "You froze with my mother." We didn't talk much after that, just moved around each other like strangers in a shared rental, the kind of silence that makes sound feel offensive. He slept on the couch for 2 nights, and on the third, he packed a duffel bag, said he needed space. Didn't say where he was going, just hugged me like someone who didn't want to be the villain but couldn't stop the damage either. I didn't cry, just locked the door after he left, sat in the kitchen with the envelope between my hands and wondered how long she'd been planning this, how deep it really went. The next morning, I woke to an email from my father's lawyer, subject line, "Urgent inquiry regarding the house title." I opened it slowly, hands already shaking. The message was brief. "We've received a formal request to investigate the legitimacy of your inheritance due to mental instability and lack of independence at time of transfer." I read it 3 times before I understood. She wasn't just trying to ruin my marriage. She was trying to erase me completely. I forwarded the email to myself, then closed the laptop and sat on the floor again. Same spot, same cold tile, but this time I wasn't alone in the house. She stood in the doorway holding her morning tea like it was a trophy, said, "If he doesn't come back, you know I'll have to step in." I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at her, asked, "Why do you hate me this much?" And she sighed, actually sighed, like I was exhausting her, said, "It's not hate, Ray, it's practicality. You never could see the bigger picture." And then she walked away, humming softly, her robe trailing behind her like smoke. I sat there for a long time. Long enough to hear the doorbell ring and her heels clack toward it. Long enough to hear her greet someone with a name I hadn't heard in years, Gavin. I stayed in the hallway, just out of view, holding my breath as Gavin stepped inside, his voice deeper than I remembered, more grounded, the kind of voice that had learned how to be invisible and use it well. She greeted him like he was family, kissed his cheek, said, "You're looking strong," and he replied, "You're looking busy." I could feel the shift immediately. He didn't hug her back, didn't sit when she offered tea, just stood near the door like he was half in, half out, and when she asked if I knew he was coming, he said, "Not yet." He found me in the kitchen 5 minutes later, stood in the doorway like we were kids who hadn't met yet, said my name like it was something worth saying slowly. I didn't hug him either, just nodded, pulled out the chair across from mine and waited. He didn't touch the coffee I poured, just tapped his fingers against the table, said, "I've been watching from a distance." I asked, "Why now?" And he said, "Because I got an offer. I didn't even need to ask who it came from. Just stared at him until he said, 'She offered me cash to sign my half away.'" My laugh surprised both of us, short and sharp, said everything before I opened my mouth. He pulled out his phone, slid it across the table, audio already queued up. Her voice came through clear. "It's just paperwork, Gavin. Ray doesn't even know you're on the deed. She'll cry, sure, but she always breaks before she bites." I closed my eyes, forced myself to listen, heard her promise money, protection, even a new car, and at the end, Gavin's voice asking, "And what happens when she finds out?" Followed by her quiet shrug, her soft answer, "She'll have nothing left to fight with by then." When it ended, I looked at him and asked the only thing I could think to say, "Why record it?" And he said, "Because I wanted to see what side you were on." I asked, and he shrugged, said, still watching, but something in his eyes told me he already knew. He reached into his coat again, pulled out a folder thicker than it needed to be, set it down between us like a peace offering. Inside were copies of her emails to Colin, scanned pages from my sealed records, a letter drafted to my father's lawyer claiming I was unfit to hold title. I stared at the handwriting, still familiar in the worst ways, her voice in ink saying I couldn't manage property, couldn't handle financial responsibilities without supervision. Gavin said, "She was planning this before your birthday," and I nodded. "Already knowing. Before the house," he added, "before Colin." I looked at him across the table, asked, "Then why help me now?" And he didn't blink, just said, "Because it's mine too, and I'd rather have it with you than take her money." He picked up his phone, showed me a second recording, this time of her husband, talking numbers, legal angles, and something else, divorce leverage. By the time he left, it was dark outside, the kind of dark that makes old houses creak like they're holding secrets under their floorboards. I locked the front door behind him, then sat in the hallway listening to her upstairs, laughing with someone over speakerphone. Probably telling them how close she was, how much she deserved. I didn't confront her, didn't announce what I knew, just moved slowly through the house and collected things. Paper, passwords, the small silver flash drive from Colin's old drawer, the one she probably forgot she used, the one that had her voice begging him to just finish it already. The next morning I emailed the lawyer, attached the recordings, the documents, the transcripts, everything in one file named for the record. Didn't explain much in the message, just asked him to confirm that the house would remain in my name. And if Gavin's signature would be required for any changes. His reply came within an hour, yes to both. "And you should know, Ms. Vale, we've recently been contacted about a possible legal maneuver by your mother. We've rejected it. Please keep us informed." I read it twice, then closed the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and waited for her to notice the shift. She came downstairs wearing my robe again, humming softly, flipped through the mail like it was hers, then looked at me and said, "You're quiet this morning." I stared at her for a long time, then said, "Gavin's name is on the deed," and she froze, just for a moment. Enough for me to see it. The first crack. She recovered fast, smiled like I was mistaken, said, "He signed it over," and I shook my head, said, "He didn't." She tilted her head, like she couldn't believe I was still trying to win. Said, "Ray, sweetheart, that house doesn't belong to you the way you think it does," and I just smiled back. She didn't ask how I knew, just poured coffee like she hadn't spent the last month trying to cut the floor out from under me, stirred cream into her mug like we were still playing house, said, "If you want Gavin on your side, that's fine. It doesn't change anything." I didn't answer right away, just watched her walk through my kitchen in bare feet like it was hers, touching the counter, adjusting the fruit bowl she'd bought without asking. "He's not loyal," she added, quieter now. "He's a placeholder, same as you," and I almost laughed, but it came out breath instead. I waited until she sat down, until she took that first sip like a queen easing into ceremony, then slid the printed transcript across the table, just the one page, the part where she told Colin, if she won't move, we make her look unstable. We hit her where it sticks. Her eyes flicked down, widened, not dramatically, just enough to see the fear creep in behind the calm. "Where did you get this?" she asked, and I didn't answer, just tapped the page once, watched her reread her own words, listened to the silence build in her chest like a second heartbeat. "I was helping you," she said finally, folding the page slowly, pressing each crease like it meant something. "You never knew how to keep what you were given." I asked her what she meant by help, and she laughed, bitter now. That house should have gone to me. I was the one left with the mess, the years, the cleanup. I nodded, because that part wasn't a lie. She did stay. She did hold what he dropped, but she also made me pay for it every day after, in quiet cuts and cold birthdays, in the way. She loved other people louder than she loved me. "You know he wrote to me?" she said suddenly, not meeting my eyes now, fingers tight around the mug. 2 months before he died, said he regretted the way things ended, said you'd been brave. I didn't react, didn't know how to. She was still looking past me, maybe to the window, maybe through it. "I never answered," she added. Didn't want him thinking he could buy grace with a letter, and I believed her, because she never forgave people who stopped choosing her, not even in death, especially not in death. Her love had always been something with payment plans and expiration dates. That afternoon, she packed in silence, didn't slam drawers, didn't linger, just moved like someone folding herself smaller with each item placed into a bag. The twins waited in the car, music too loud, windows cracked. I watched from the porch as she stood by the gate, looked up at the house once, not wistfully, not in defeat, just in observation, like she wanted to remember the shape of something she almost had. When she turned to go, I didn't call out, didn't wave. Just watched the car roll down the drive, tires crunching gravel like it had been waiting to be alone again. Colin called once, 5 days later. Didn't leave a message. Didn't try again. I heard from his sister through a mutual friend that he moved back to the city. Took a job at a firm he said he was done with. I didn't chase him. Didn't hate him either. Just stopped looking for signs of someone coming back who already knew how to leave. Gavin stayed another week. Fixed the garage door. Cleared out the attic. Ate cereal straight from the box like we were kids again. Then left a note on the counter that said, "Keep it steady," and I taped it to the fridge. I started repainting the front hallway, first just one wall, then the baseboards, moved slowly, like the house needed time to adjust too. Opened all the windows one morning, let air move through places that hadn't breathed in weeks, folded Trina's robe into a box. Placed it next to the guest sheets I wouldn't be needing. Every corner I touched felt quieter, more mine. The way old houses sometimes soften when they realize you're staying, not because you're trapped, but because you choose to. I slept without earplugs for the first time in weeks, and when I woke, the silence felt earned. I still get mail with her name on it, still catch her perfume in the downstairs hallway sometimes, the kind that settles in fabric no matter how hard you scrub. I don't try to erase it anymore, just move around it. Like you do with something that once tried to shape you, but failed. I see Gavin's name in the paperwork now, see my own beside it, solid, unmoved. I cook more than I used to, leave dishes in the sink sometimes, let the dog onto the couch even though she hated that. Some mornings I walk through the house and whisper, "Mine," just once, just enough.